Buenos días, queridos espectadores. Welcome to my session about adaptive cards and how you can use them uh, to increase user experience in your business processes. Lastly, I was thinking about that we are living now in a hard times. We are all locked up in our homes, in our apartments, and it's really cool that we have such an amazing initiatives in the community, such as Microsoft X5 today, Madrid, that they didn't give up, that they still wanted to deliver you the content, the sessions. And so I'm really proud for my colleagues from Spain that we can, well, see each other this way virtually, but still we are able to anyhow interact with the community and give you the power and strength to really develop and learn. My name is, yeah, that's like a real session. It should work, but it's not. All right. My name is Tomasz Poszetek. I'm coming from Warsaw in Poland. I'm a business applications MVP, and I call myself an expert. I do work with Office 365 and SharePoint and Microsoft technologies for, well, years. Just with Power Apps and Flow is like 2 years plus. The SharePoint is something I'm working with for like 10 years over. And I'm continuously learning, I'm continuously sharing my knowledge. I love to share. And I encourage you to follow me either on my Twitter or my blog post. You can do some buzz around this session right now on Twitter. I'd appreciate it very much. Last thing I wanted to mention is that I want to make a big applause together with you at your homes for our sponsors, because without them, this event, even that is taking place online, wouldn't be possible, because still the sponsors are supporting us in doing what we are doing, are giving out the funds to really deliver you the top-notch speakers and top-notch sessions. So I'm really happy that we still have them, even though we are now online in the virtual world, that they didn't give up on us as well. All right, let's move on to the agenda. The agenda is quite short. First, I will tell you a little bit of a story behind the cards. Why did they eventually arrive in Microsoft landscape? Then I'll talk briefly about the message cards. Why this technology, although is obsolete, is still kind of competitive or makes a competition to adaptive cards. Then about adaptive card itself, and then what we can expect from the future releases. All right, dear people. So when we look at the modern tools for communication, at the modern social applications, we can identify a certain areas within the user interface that are kind of like like a tiles, like a surrounded, outstanding from the rest of the content, dedicated frames that display specific content. Like this one, the video, right? So this is the video, it's taken from YouTube. But when we take it and when we now go across different applications, we'll notice that the content is just the same. What is different is the surroundings, is how this content actually interacts with the user experience of the host, so of the application that is displaying this content, right? So in a few words, if you'd like to somehow summarize, make a definition of what are the cards, is that the cards is a technology, is a concept, is a mean that is used to actually display the content that we want to present, right, in the host experience. So for example, if we have Teams using a dark mode, then the card that we display in Teams using dark mode will as well have a dark background. If we have a host that has, I know, green text and blue buttons, then the card display in that host will also have a green text and blue buttons, and so on and so on. So crafting a card, we are only focusing on the content and the composition, but we don't actually care about this integrity with the host layout, with the host interface, with the host colors, font faces, and so on and so on. Few words about the history. It all started around 2016. I mean, not the cards itself, but the history of the cards in Microsoft, all right? So it all started in 2016 when someone in Microsoft realized that they already have a couple of teams working on actually the same things. Like they have Windows team working on live tiles. They had bot framework team working on some kind of a cards. They had Exchange team working on actionable messages, and they realized that hey, we're just doing all the same. Let's join forces. Let's create a single unified and consistent technology that can be used across our platforms. Not that everyone creates their own. We just create one and then we just share it. And so in 2017, Matt Hittinger joined David Clow and they set up a team. And in 2017 only, they already published to the world message cards. And then later on, next year, they published version 1.0 of the adaptive card. So the technology that is still with us, still is present. Now, who are those heroes of this technology? First, Matt Hittinger. He joined Microsoft just prior to create his team. Before then, he was a dev leader and he was overseeing the delivery of the mobile apps for high consumer profile brands or high profile consumer brands. I'm just mixing it up all the time. Anyway, what he learned there was how to create nice looking interfaces, how to avoid the obstacles and how to avoid the frustration in the users, how to create an apps that are really attractive to users. And so he brought this knowledge to the team designing adaptive cards. He's also a very active community person. He's speaking in a lot of user groups. He has an active Twitter account, so feel free to follow him. Then we have also David Clow, who is working for Microsoft for over 15 years already, and who's always been somehow connected with the Outlook, with the Exchange teams. So he started with creation of the EWS, so the Exchange Web Services Managed API. He was working for OWA and Office add-ins. And then once he joined the adaptive cards team, he actually focused on, again, this development side. So for example, he is a father of the adaptive cards designer that I will be showcasing later. And now he's working intensively on unifying the schema of actionable messages that you can post to Outlook and adaptive cards so that when you create an adaptive card, you will be actually able to post it directly to Outlook as well. Cool. What makes cards in general, but as well the cards from Microsoft, so special? First of all, the point is that this technology allows you to render the cards natively on any host where the SDK is implemented. So you don't actually need to craft a different version of UI per the host, or you don't have to store your adaptive card somewhere and then it's published and then it's downloaded by the host and displayed. No, you just define the JSON code and then the host takes the JSON code, it reads it and then renders the card. It also, thanks to that, automatically adapts to the host user experience. So as said, blue background in a card as well. Thanks to that, it has, the creation of those cards is quite low cost because you don't have to create a separate version of the code and of the card per each host, per each device, per each whatever. You just create it once and then the hosts are actually just adopting it to look seamlessly, to look integrated with the rest of the interface. And lastly, it is also a very secure technology because whatever you put in this JSON definition of the card has to follow the JSON schema. And then if there is anything that is not in the schema, then it won't be simply rendered. It'll be rendered as a plain text. So it is really secure because you can't inject any kind of a malicious code or do any other harmful thing to the end user. Adaptive cards or the cards in general are having an extensible schema. So if you're a developer, you can take SDK and simply add their properties, add their functionalities that you're missing, but that's up to you. You're the owner of it. But it won't influence, impact, it won't make any impact on the general scope of the version actually published. It will just have a local impact. Cards are not only used to display information, they're as well used to interact with the user. So they have actions to open URLs, that have actions to toggle parts of the cards, to open other cards and things. They also have the possibility to display a form where user can just provide information, and this information can then be collected by the host. And also what is important, from the day one they were created, they support those text-to-speech software, so that they are even they can be used by all those people with small, bigger disabilities, and can be as well digest by the text-to-speech applications that are just gathering information from the display. Yay! All right, let's jump onto the message cards. Message cards, as the technology, as you saw, it was born in 2017. It was a successor of actionable messages. Although actionable messages are still live today, message cards as well, although they are set on the documentation page that you should just move away from them because they're obsolete, they're not being developed, they're just like a closed project. But they have one benefit over adaptive cards that is still making them a competitor, which is the possibility to post them not only to Microsoft Teams, but to other software using the webhooks. You will see in a moment why I really value this feature. The message card schema, so how you can lay out the content, is very simple. It is just built out of two major blocks, the section and potential actions. Potential actions always at the bottom. Section is built from the activity, from text, from facts. You can multiply those creation elements by multiplying the section. Nothing more. So, jump to the message cards demo. First of all, what I want to say is that this demo is created for the scenario that we have an office, we have a canteen somewhere in the office, and we would like the canteen to post to a Teams channel of our employees every day a menu with the possibility to order the food. Now, I could possibly do this with Power Apps, but building this with Power Apps would certainly bring a lot of more work to be done. Then I would need to put it in a separate tab, and then I would possibly would like to add more functionalities and just build it and endlessly build it. With message cards, what I commonly do is posting a single form to the channel that allows users to write the response that is being collected by the canteen, so they know who ordered to, well, which desk and then how many portions, so they can deliver and charge them. This is that simple. Let me show you how it works. The first things first, I just want to briefly go through how it works. So the advantage of message cards, despite the fact that we can post them over the webhook to Microsoft Teams channel, is that I can as well define the target URL for the submit action. In adaptive cards, all these submit actions are moving the data to the host, and then the host is responsible for process the data and then do some other actions with it. But in message cards, what I can do is I can actually define the target URL. So in this case of my message card, that's just a second flow that is being triggered on the new web request. And with that, I can actually post this message card to Teams channel and then collect multiple responses back. I don't have to close this card after the first response. I can collect numbers of responses. So that's a huge advantage. So let me show you how that works. So I'll say, don't blame me, gazpacho. I have no idea if I wrote it correctly. I believe that not. Gazpacho. I love gazpacho. Then, of course, a steak. And dessert, I don't like desserts. I don't know what is the real proper Spanish dessert, so I'll just write a cocoa, or maybe ice cream. And then the extras, let's do the wine. All right, so that's the menu for today. Now, once I jump into Teams, you can see that I already received the message card that has all the information I provided. Note as well that it is displayed on the full width of the of this message tile, and plus its height is collapsed, so I don't see the whole message card at once. I need to click this see more, see less button. Let me just type in the information. Tomasz Samor first. I'll take one and I will take extras. Now, not one thing more. Once I hit submit, this card will be replaced, because actually I wanted to follow the scenario where the card is replaced, as I wanted to show you how we can send the confirmation message, but I could leave it opened so that others could as well fill it in. Nevertheless, once I submit the button and the card is replaced, you'll see that it still follows the same layout, the same, let's say, look and feel of my original card. All right, so my order has been submitted, is received, is confirmed. Now, let me show you how it works. So you remember this message card was submitting the data to a second flow that is triggered on the web request. And it's, again, a very simple flow that just gets the data, calculates the total, and then what is important, it sends back a full message card as a response, as a confirmation. Now, if I set this parameter card update in body to false, then my message card would be left opened. All right, so that's the difference. Cool, huh? All right, let's jump back to the message, to the adaptive cards now. So the adaptive cards, as said, that's a successor of message cards. So it inherits all the good things and all the greatest functionalities from message cards. It is, of course, more advanced because it is just being developed constantly. It is already implemented in, well, majority of applications. Now, what is also important about adaptive cards is that its SDK today is present in the most of the Microsoft 365 communication tools. It is in Outlook, it's in Teams, it's in Cortana Skills, Windows Timeline, Bot Framework. By the end of July, beginning of August, it will also be present in Power Virtual Agents, and possibly one day it will also be implemented and available as maybe as a component in Power Apps or as a visualization in Power BI. But that's something for some time, not today. Plus, Adaptive Card is a cool technology for developers. It has SDK built for the most of the open source development platforms. Some of the SDK was created by the Microsoft themselves. Some of them, like Flutter or React Native, was created by the community. So just imagine how huge the community is if they were able to create the SDK for another platforms. That's cool. I love this in Microsoft. We have such an active community. The adaptive cards template, schema is a little bit more complex, but maybe not complex, but more flexible. So that's the version 1.0, quite old. From the version 1.1, the actions that are now in the bottom can be actually placed anywhere within the contents of the card. So there is much more of the flexibility creating the layout. Also, we have more controls. We have more containers. So we have the column set, which is kind of a table. We have fact set. So this is a fact set here. This is fact and I mean key value thing. We have an image set, which is kind of a gallery. And we have a lot of controls like plain text field, rich text field, image, audio, media, lots of, and then inputs, text, long text, radio, checkbox, toggle, date, choice set, whatever, name it. There is like everything. We can create with adaptive card the whole interfaces actually. But how do we create an adaptive card? That's simple. There is an adaptivecards.io/designer tool that you can see right here. It is actually created by David Glow, so that's his baby. Now, as you can see, this designer is quite simple, but it has this huge feature benefit that you can actually create your adaptive card following the drag and drop approach. So for us, power users, if we don't want to get messy in JSON, we can simply go to the designer and then drag and drop onto the canvas and then configure here in the elements. Now, there are certain things in the layout, in the configuration of the card that are available, like starting version 1.1 or 1.2, like the media control. It's purpose is to actually play the video or the music right from the card without the need for the user to navigate away from the card to the, for example, YouTube. But it is working only in version 1.2. Now, version 1.2 is implemented in Microsoft Teams, for example, but not in a full scope. And then, for example, this control is not working. It won't be rendered. Other thing is we have a cool feature called a style. We can style buttons, we can style text, we can style elements. This functionality, this property is as well not supported in Microsoft Teams. So when you're crafting an adaptive card and you're thinking about sending this to Microsoft Teams, then be sure you know how it will render in Microsoft Teams. And there are tools to help you with that. Because you can go, for example, to App Studio in Microsoft Teams. The App Studio Microsoft Teams also has the viewer for adaptive cards that actually displays only those features, functionalities that are supported. There is also Adaptive Cards Visualizer for Visual Studio Code. There is also WPF Visualizer if you are building Windows applications and want to use SDK for Windows. There is also Actionable Messages Debugger for Outlook, which is a very handy tool when you're posting adaptive cards or actionable messages in Outlook messages, and you just want to find out what is not working, what is just causing issues. And there is still Message Cards Playground, where you can craft message cards, but they're only in pure JSON, so I don't recommend doing that because it's really getting messy. All right. So now let's jump to adaptive cards demo. The scenario I want to cover right now is about building actually, it's about building a solution that is used by a company to get approvals for incoming invoices. So imagine we have an invoice coming from our vendor, and then we want it to be processed by an approver, and then maybe someday posted to accountancy or to CRM, stored, archived, paid, whatever. Here the scenario works like that. I have created a form processing model in AI Builder because I wanted to even speed it up. I wanted to speed up the processing of the invoices. So I've built and trained the model for the specific layout of the invoices, so that once a new invoice is being scanned and then processed by the AI Builder, it already gets the data out of this invoice, out of this image, like to whom it was issued, what is the total value, what is the due date, what is the total amount to be paid, and so on and so on. Then, if you'd like to follow my trails and you would like to create your own AI Builder to get data out of the documents, then bear in mind that if you have different layouts, you should create a separate model per each layout, because AI Builder is not that very much smart that it can recognize a similar fields if they're placed in different locations on different documents. So just create a model per each layout of the document. Nevertheless, I have here my invoices model that is going to be used to process invoices from the specific vendor. And as well, I have my small application that is going to be used by, for example, accountancy to, where it is, it's kind of a SAP. That is going to be used, for example, by the front desk. So front desk receives an invoice, and then they scan it. Now the invoice is being processed. AI Builder is trying to recognize the values. All right, it's scanned. So now I can turn off the overlay that shows what was matched. What is the confidence around each field? What is the percentage of confidence? So for example, build to and contact is just 70%. For other fields, it's around 100%. Now, these are the information now I'm able to get out of this document. And by hitting send for approval, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send these values to Power Automate that will generate an adaptive card, send it to Microsoft Teams, so that the accountancy team will not have to navigate away from this channel, will not have to switch to a different application, will not have to go to flow approvals, will not have to even read an email. This approval task will be just in front of their eyes, so they will be able simply to click approve or reject, and that's done. No disturbance, no frustration. So send. Let me wait a while. It should be generated in a second. All right, there it is. So you can see this is an adaptive card. Now it's an adaptive card. The difference is its width is not the full width of the tile. Its height, yeah, it is. So it is not being shrinked. Now, the information I can read here is the one that was taken from the invoice. There is just one quantity missing. It was not discovered. But what I mean is that right now the team is simply able to provide the response, their approval. I can add here a hyperlink to open this document in a separate window so that it will provide additional information that will be able to compare the original document with a task here. But that's not important. Important is that they have the information at a glance. They don't have to move elsewhere. Everything is in their digital workplace. Oh gosh, I need to speak slower, I think. Anyway, let me approve it. And approve. Now, what you saw was that, again, my adaptive card was replaced by the new one. But in this case, the new adaptive card or the confirmation card is not actually following this crafted carefully by me layout that you just saw before. It is a default adaptive card layout logo created by Flowbot. So the host that is actually getting the response from the card and then submitting back to the confirmation. Now, how this works? Actually, since January, we have two new actions in Power Automate. These are send an adaptive card to Microsoft Teams channel or user and wait for the response. Two new actions, channel and user. Before January, we were able to send a custom adaptive card to Microsoft Teams user and a channel. However, anytime we wanted to put their form fields and then we wanted to eventually get back the data from this form, we were just constantly being shown a warning or error message because the Flowbot, the host for our card, didn't know how to handle this request. It was only configured or programmed to handle a request coming from the adaptive card generated for the flow approval task. But from January, we have two new actions and we can actually create our own custom cards and get the response. Now again, we can only get the first response. With message cards, as I said, we can get multiple the responses, right? Any number we want. With message cards, we can only, with adaptive cards, we can only get the first response. Let me show you how it works. So this is my flow. It is really complex. I mean, complex. I did create a whole big number of actions. There are a lot of variables initiated to get the input data. There is a loop that is going through every item from the invoice and basically is just trying to concatenate the adaptive cards JSON code I've created in the beginning, replacing parts of the content with the outcomes of the items, blah, 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 blah. It took me really a long hour to create this whole flow because this concatenation of the adaptive card JSON and replacing specific places with those outcomes, that was really, really, yeah, it required a lot of work. Now, once I've created this adaptive card, I've concatenated all the information. I was then able to post it to Microsoft Teams channel and wait for the response. Now, note one thing, there is a configuration saying update message and show updated card. So if I say yes to show updated card, then my original card will be replaced by this message. And the bad thing about that is, first, I can't really get any kind of information provided by the user because this is created in advance. So I don't know about what the user is going to respond and I can't use it in here. Plus, I can actually craft another adaptive card. So I would like the best approach would be, of course, to be able to input here a JSON code of a new adaptive card that will replace the existing one, right? So that it will really follow the same user interface. Now, if I say no to show update card, this will obviously not replace my form with a confirmation message, but it doesn't matter because the form won't accept any more responses at all. Wow, this flow is huge, right? It has a lot of code and a lot of work. Now imagine one thing. What would you say if you had this possibility to simply create an adaptive card code, like this one here, and then take its value and only provide data to replace a specific placeholders? So you create a template and provide the data. Now this is already possible. We have already a solution that is called adaptive cards templating language or adaptive cards templating in general. The purpose of this solution is actually to let you create this template of an adaptive card, to put the placeholders in the curly brackets, to set a scope, to bind those placeholders with the data, to input conditions, to input rules, to input formatting to text, and then just to simply display this adaptive card and render it together with the data by the host, so that you don't actually need to care about inputting those small outcomes in the JSON code in Microsoft Flow. In the end, you would only be able to put a JSON, add data, JSON, merge it together, submit to the host, and then it is being replaced at the rendering time. So that's really cool feature. Plus the adaptive card templating language. So this is the technology that is used to add this additional layer on the adaptive cards, how they render, lets you to use a scopes, binding scopes. Now the binding scope can be for the data. So it tells the card what parts of data should be used where. It also gives you a device scope. Now device scope, that's a real thing. It gives you information about the host. So inside the card, you know what device is used to display the card, what is the application, maybe even what is its version. So having this information, you can even create a card that have a conditions inside and is showing different parts of its content depending on the information coming from the host. So for example, you have a card with a device logo, and you can display a different logo on iOS and different on Android. One of the examples, right? Now, the adaptive cards templating, when speaking about Microsoft Teams, is very, very basically supported. We can only send the keys and the values, the straightforward text values. We can't use loops. We can't use conditions. We can't use string formatting. So we can't use, for example, displaying data in a specific format or currencies. We can't use scopes, the device scopes, for example. So it's very, very, very limited. Although it already somehow works. So I keep my fingers crossed, whichever fingers, that very soon this will be just replaced and fully supported. So let me show you what I mean, because I'm just talking and talking and talking and you didn't see a thing. So you remember my adaptive card I've created for invoices approval? There it is. That's my adaptive card. But now see that instead of those values, I just have a lot of the curly brackets in here. Also, I have here just one row of values for the items table. And I as well have this label here warning that the amount is too high or too low. And you can notice that this label will be showed only if the total number of the value will be above 5,000. So that's a condition. Also note that this adaptive cards content has a data binding. So there is a data added to the adaptive card schema, code, which is then going to be used to replace those placeholders by the host, of course, in the real time and at the generation time. So now, if I was able to use the same approach in Microsoft Teams, the only thing I would actually have to do to generate the same card to Microsoft Teams, as you saw already, would be to prepare a data in a desired format. So to put the items in a table, map the specific values taken from the invoice to the specific keys, and that's it. It would take me, for example, 10 minutes to just create the same thing that took me over an hour in the previous approach. Now, once I hit the preview mode, you will notice that this card will be just replaced with the real data, just like if it was rendered by the host. Ta-da! Now, there is another thing, very cool thing that we have about the templating, that is called the templating service. So the teams is working on a feature that lets you to discover if there is an existing template for the given data, JSON data in a JSON format. It is using the language understanding intelligent software in the background, so the LUIS, so-called, and it's searching over the GitHub repository of templates. But there could be an approach that you just create your own repository in SQL database or even in SharePoint, and you just look up that repository to get your own templates and then display them. The point is, you keep the templates separately from the data and just merge it together once it is being rendered. It's very cool. You can just have versioning for the templates, access to the templates. You can just keep really a full security over these templates. Speaking about the adaptive cards templating service, on the other hand, you can find it, for example, in the preview version of Microsoft Graph. So for example, if I hit get data for my profile, you can see it is being displayed as a JSON. But there is a new tab here called adaptive cards. Once I hit it, you will notice a label saying fetching adaptive card. What it means is that at that moment, it is contacting the language understanding intelligence service that is looking up the GitHub repository to find a template which confidence matching to this data, to this JSON data, is the highest. Ta-da! And there it is. It's already a generated adaptive card for the given JSON, right? It's that simple. And you can use it in your solutions, in your company as well. All right, I have just a few more minutes to talk about. So right now, I'll just jump on to what we have ahead. What is ahead of us, what is already with us, but maybe not available to be used. So that just gives you a bigger picture on how adaptive cards going to be even cooler. So today we have the version 1.2 publicly released, and the team is working on version 1.3. One of the coolest features from version 1.2 and 1.1 was the media support. That is unfortunately not working in Teams. That allows you to play video and sound directly in the message, in the card. There is also the base64 image support that is very handy if you do have an image that is being hosted, for example, in SharePoint, and the thread that displays the card has no permissions to it. So if you put the image as a base64 string, it is actually just being embedded in the card. There are also inline actions and a very basic data validation, for example, to mark which fields are required and which are not. With version 1.3, what is coming up is, for example, this functionality to use the themable icons, so to put icons next to URLs. It's going to be more responsive web design like oriented. But what I really like the most is that we will be given the advanced input validation. And that set is, and by that I mean that we'll be able to validate fields against regular expressions, against some patterns, and maybe other conditions. And this will really let us to create a very advanced forms that actually wouldn't need to be then validated on the side of the host. Right. I also hope that once the templating language is really released, is really completed, then we'll also have the we'll also see the productive release of those two Microsoft Teams actions, and that Microsoft Teams will really fully support the SDK in version 1.2, for example. What I just wanted to show you is that if you go to the URL that is called ak.ms/adaptive cards roadmap, then you'll land on this web page. That is actually this web page. That is actually showing you all the features on which the adaptive cards team is working on right now, and which are planned for the future releases, which are planned for for which quarter. So this is kind of of the roadmap basically. Plus you have this backlog, which is called like a vNext. So here you can find all these features, all these ideas that are just fueling the backlog that can be maybe one day implemented. And for that, you can find here this card author service. It's really cool. It's a total solution created by the teams, by the adaptive card teams, and its purpose is to give you like a workspace where you can collaborate and contribute on adaptive cards. You can version them, you can grant permissions to them, and it also gives you this service that you can call and it returns you a given card. It's really cool. And it was built actually by interns that were just doing their internship. And it's really cool. I really have my fingers crossed that this will be as well released one day and used to let us users to use in our premises, in our companies. All right. So I said we have this version 2.0 that is being just like in parallel crafted with version 1.3 that will bring us even more features and functionalities around templating. And just one last thing, one last feature. So since we have this extensible schema and we can extend adaptive cards when we implement the SDK in our own applications with whatever we want. If we want as well to change a little bit the look and feel, the controls from the default ones, we can use the Office UI Fabric. So we can extend adaptive cards in our implementation with Office UI Fabric. And that's really cool. It just shows how much flexible and extendable this technology is. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you once again, our dear sponsors. Thank you really that you were supporting this event, that you didn't give up on us. And thank you to my dear attendees, my dear listeners, for watching my presentation, for, well, spending nearly hour with me. If you have any questions about adaptive cards, about this technology, or, well, whatever, any else around Power Platform, you can simply reach me out using any of these channels that I've provided here. So you can just write me an email, you can find me and have a beer with me, or go to Twitter, tweet me something, DM me, watch my videos, whatever. I'm everywhere. Once again, thank you very much.